Where we left off last time, we talked about the need for a page object, which has variables representing the text for the story, the choices the user can make, and other pages that those choices lead to, and methods for displaying its text, displaying the choices, and returning the page that corresponds to a particular choice the user made. So let's go ahead and make that object now. Here's what your game looked like when we last left off. We had just a bare bones hello world with some if statements. So over here on the left-hand column, let's add a file, and we'll call it page with a capital P .java, and then hit enter. So here's where we'll define our new class. If you remember how a class is defined, you start public class, and then the name of the class has to match the name of your file. So page with a capital P is what we called it. Usually at the top of the class, you define all of the variables for the class. So that's the information that every object is going to need. We'll make our variables private, which means that only the page itself is allowed to access the variables. So what variables did we need? We said we needed the text, and that's going to be a string. We said we needed a list of choices. So I think an array list is going to be a good option here. Remember, capital A, capital L, and it's going to be an array list of strings, and we'll call those choices. And then last, we need a list of other pages that each of those choices leads to. So let's make another list, only this time it's going to be a list of other page objects. What should we call this variable? Maybe I'll call it next pages, because this list of pages is a list of the next pages that the user might choose. So after variables, we need a constructor. The constructor is the method that actually creates the page object by assigning values to these variables. So whenever you create a new page, you need to assign the starting values. So let's do that. Page. I think we're going to create each page using only the input text. So I'm going to call this page text as an input, and we'll set this page's text to be whatever page text we passed as an input here. For choices, we're going to just create a new array list string, and you have to have opening and closing parentheses because it is a constructor that you're running, which is a method that makes the new list. Same thing for next pages. Or did I call it next page? Next pages, because there are several pages there. Same thing, we're creating a new list. All right, so now we have a constructor. Let's create method stubs, so that's like empty methods for each of the behaviors that we want it to have. Well, actually, I guess some of these are short enough that we can just implement them. So public void, let's call this display text. And here we'll just say system.out.println text. Great, so that displays the text for that page. Let's make a method called display options. Or I guess let's call it display choices, because that's what we chose to call it up here. So this method is supposed to display all of the choices that the user can make. And those choices are up here. So let's start out by, well, let's think about what we want this to look like first. I think this is going to work out nicely if we have every choice have its own number, and then we ask the user to type the number of the choice they want. So let's do this. Type the number for the choice you want. And then, because it's a string, I need it to be in quotations. So because this is a list, we need to be able to loop over every single location in this list and display all the choices. So we'll use a for loop. Lock will be location. Remember, all lists start with a location number 0. So we'll say let's start at location 0. Let's keep going as long as the location number is smaller than choices dot size, which is the total number of choices. And then lock equals lock plus 1. So that means the location is going up by 1 every time. So this is just a location number. So we could do system.out.print lock, and that's going to display 0 and then 1 and then 2 and then 3. What we actually want to do is we actually want to get out the particular string at that location in the list. So I'm going to call it choice. Choices is the name of the list, and I'm going to say get the choice at location lock. So remember, choices is the list. If I said choices.get0, that would get out the string at location 0. If I said 1, that would get out the string at location 1. Instead, I'm going to use this variable because this variable starts at 0, but then counts up to 1 and then 2 and then 3. So as this loop is repeating, I'm going to print a number, and then I'm going to get out the string that I want to display, which represents the choice. So now let's say system.out.println. I'm going to start by printing a dot and a space, because up here I'd printed a number, like 0. So I want it to say 0 dot space, and then let's display the choice. Okay, so we think that's probably going to work. We should probably test it in a minute. What else did we want to do? So display text, display choices. Let's check the slide. Let's wait on getting the next page for user's choice until next time. Right now, let's just give a way to add another option. And then we'll try and recreate our simple if statement hello world version, but using the objects. So let's make a method called add choice. And if we're going to add a choice from this page, I think we need to give our object 2 pieces of information. We need to give it the choice text, so that's what they're going to type. And then we need to give it the page that that choice is going to lead to. And I'm going to call that next page. And so all we really want to do is add both of these to the end of the lists here. So I'll say choices, dot add choice text. And then I'll say, what did I call the list of pages? Next pages. So next pages dot add next page. I'm thinking now that these names sound very similar to somebody who's new. So pay close attention to the S here. Next pages implies that it's the list of all of the pages that I might go to next, corresponding to the choices that I might make. Here, next page is a single page that the user, well, not the user, that another part of my program is going to give to this method when we want to add that page as a possible option from the page that we're on right now. So again, the purpose of this method is to take the particular choice that they might type and the page that it leads to, and add those at the end of the lists that keep track of all of the things that we could do from our current page. All right, so this is enough for this object for the moment. Let's end this video by going back to main and rewriting main to use this object. So up here at the top, let's create a page object called start, and I'm going to say new page. And remember, the constructor for the page takes the page text as an input. So I'm going to copy this text, which is the page text. And now I've got a page object. But I need to load the page object with options. So I could say start dot, is it going to autocomplete for me? Seemingly not. So add choice, we'd said. So now I want to add a choice for the left, and I want to add a choice to the right. So I could say start.add choice, and then left, or let's say go left, because that's what the user would select. But then I actually need to give it the page object that this choice would lead to. And I'm realizing I don't actually have that page object yet. So I think what we've got to do is create all of the pages first, and then describe which pages lead to which other pages. So I'm going to create another page called waterfall. And this one, that's the whole page text. And I'm going to create another page called ogre. All right, so I've got 3 pages now. So what I want to do is I want to have my start page lead to either the waterfall or the ogre, depending on whether or not we went left or right. So let's tell start that we want to add a choice called go left that leads to the waterfall page. And now let's tell start that we want to add a choice called go right that leads to the ogre page. All right, so far so good. So let's delete these if statements. Well, I guess we can leave them there for the moment. Let's do this. I'm going to use a multi-line comment to comment them out. If you don't know about multi-line comments, if you do /*, it will ignore everything until you get to a */. So I've commented out that entire section. All right, so we've built our pages, we've linked them together. So now let's run some of the methods to make sure they work. We're not trying to actually make the game look the way that we want the user to see yet. We're just trying to test our object to make sure it does what we're expecting. So let's do start dot, ooh, I wish I could remember my own method names. Start dot display text and display choices. Okay, so start dot display text, and then we'll say start dot display choices. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, so I'm going to run it, and this shows why this IDE is a little bit less nice than something like IntelliJ. You've got to read the whole error message to know what's going on. So it's telling me that there's an error, semicolon expected, on page.java, and then this is line 22. So let's go to page.java, and then scroll down. Here on line 22, sure enough, I left off a semicolon. Let's run it again. So now it's saying that it cannot find the symbol array list. So this is a signal that we need to import array list. So up at the top of page, let's say import java.util.arraylist. And actually, let's go back to main. It's a little bit wasteful to say import java.util.star because that's bringing in a whole lot of objects that we're never ever going to use. So let's actually just import scanner, and hopefully that will make it compile a little bit faster. All right, so let's run it again. So hopefully this is the last bug. This is on page line 11. So here's page. And then line 11. So I'd said that next pages is supposed to be a list of page objects, but here I'm creating an array list of strings, which just goes to show I can't think and talk at the same time. All right, so let's run it again. All right, so finally it looks like it's working. And it says, welcome, you see a path left and right. Type the number for the choice you want. 0 go left, 1 go right. So what we've done is we've rewritten a lot of what we had before. We don't yet have the user input that would lead us to the new page. But at least you can see that we have the ability to create the story tree that we want. And all we need to do next time is create all of the code that will let us actually follow the tree. I think a good exercise for you before next week would be to start sketching out some of what you want your story to look like. Go ahead and create more story pages and link them together in this way. So ideally, you're going to have at least 2 or 3 levels of choices already constructed before we get to next week. Good luck!